Welcome to preparing for the SAT Evidence-Based Reading and Writing section. Before we get started, I would just like to recommend a couple of resources available to students. I would recommend www.khanacademy.org/SAT. This website offers individualized practice, specific writing and language standards practice, and live feedback. So this online tool, I cannot recommend it enough. If you go on, you can practice passages, you can practice individualized types of questions, and it will tell you which answers were right and why, and which answers were incorrect and why. For this module and all upcoming modules, we will focus on the different types of SAT reading and writing and language questions. And so there are 8 types of SAT reading questions. Today's focus for the module is going to be on author's technique and author's purpose questions. So author's purpose really gets at the author's reason for writing the text. So when we're thinking about why did the author write this text, we first need to recognize the author's point of view or opinion of the ideas that are being presented in the passage, and we need to determine how his or her point of view affects the style of the passage. So to identify the author's point of view, we need to look carefully at the words and phrases the author is using, including any words with negative or positive connotations. A useful strategy is to determine if an author's perspective is positive, negative, or neutral. Then we can look at the answer choices and put those into a similar category. So if we determined if it was positive, then we are ruling out all other negative answer choice options. The SAT often asks questions about an author's purpose or reason for writing a selection. Purpose answers the question, why did the author write this? It explains the author's overall goals. Authors may state their intent explicitly, or they may expect you to infer their purpose from details in the text. So let's take a look at the chart below. If the author's purpose is to persuade or convince us of something, we might read in the text and see certain techniques such as statistics, personal experiences, a call to action, or emotionally charged language. And so if we see these clues in the text, we can infer that the author is probably trying to persuade us of a specific idea or message. If the author is informing or educating, we might see use of facts, explanations, straightforward and objective language, or the presentation of results or interpretations. So again, as we're reading the text, we're really looking for clues as to what the author's purpose is. And those clues can kind of come in the author's technique and how they've approached what they're writing about. Some SAT questions will ask you about the purpose of an entire text. Other questions will require you to identify the purpose of a part of the text, such as how one paragraph relates to the rest of the passage. In these cases, the purpose of one sentence or paragraph may be different than the overall purpose of the whole passage. So for example, in a persuasive piece in which an author uses mostly statistics, he or she may shift to a personal anecdote to elicit emotional response from his or her readers. And so be aware of just that difference in what the question is asking you. So let's get started. Today I'm going to model annotating an SAT passage with a specific focus, and as I said earlier, our focus for today is author's purpose and author's technique. Before we even start the passage, there are always 2 things that I like to remind students of before beginning an SAT passage. The first thing is we always want to make sure we read the italicized intro text. The italicized intro text often gives us really important context for determining who the speaker is and potentially what the main idea or the topic of the passage is. Second thing we always want to do is we want to stay as engaged in the reading as possible. This means that even if the SAT passage is particularly boring, we really want to read it as enthusiastically as we can, and that will help us stay engaged and active in understanding the text. So as you probably have noticed, this does not have intro text, so we're just going to kind of jump in and begin. Last summer, researchers at Yale published a study proving that physicists, chemists, and biologists are likely to view a young male scientist more favorably than a woman with the same qualifications. So already we notice that we have a subject that has clearly been identified, and that subject is gender bias. And we can see that here with the young male scientists viewed more favorably than the women with those same qualifications. Presented with identical summaries of the accomplishments of two imaginary applicants, professors at 6 major research institutions were significantly more willing to offer the man a job. If they did hire the woman, they set her salary on average nearly $4,000 lower than the man's. Surprisingly, female scientists were as biased as their male counterparts. So already we can see the author is pointing out the disparities in the gender disparities in employment, and that's based on gender. And we can see that with if they did hire a woman, her salary was $4,000 lower than a man's. The new study goes a long way toward providing hard evidence of a continuing bias against women in the sciences. Only 1/5 of physics PhDs in this country are awarded to women, and only about half of those women are American. Of all the physics professors in the United States, only 14% are women. The numbers of Black and Hispanic scientists are even lower. In a typical year, 13 African Americans and 20 Latinos of either sex receive PhDs in physics. The reasons for those shortages are hardly mysterious. Many minority students attend secondary schools that leave them too far behind to catch up in science, and the effects of prejudice at every stage of their education are well documented. So here we notice that the author is using statistics to support her purpose. And that purpose, again, is that there is a gender bias in the science field. We also notice that her use of statistics point out that yes, there's a gender bias, but it also impacts minorities. So author is using statistics to show bias persists against both women and minorities. And we'll start where we left off. But what could still be keeping the women out of the STEM field? STEM being the current shorthand for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which offers so much in the way of job prospects, prestige, and intellectual stimulation and income. We notice here that she's setting herself up for a transition, and she's using a rhetorical question. And that question gets at the, well, what is at the root of this issue? What is causing this bias? As one of the first 2 women to earn a Bachelor of Science degree in physics from Yale, I graduated in 1978. So here we notice the author's use of first person. So she has shifted from this use of statistics here to now her own personal experience. So author shifts to personal experience. This question concerns me deeply. I attended a rural public school whose few accelerated courses in physics and calculus I wasn't allowed to take because, as my principal put it, girls never go on in science and math. Angry and bored, I began reading about space and time and teaching myself calculus from a book. So we notice that she taught herself, and that's because of her frustration with the system. And we see that frustration here when she says angry and bored. So she's giving us kind of a window into her own personal experience and really showing us how she felt going through a school that did not believe in her potential. When I arrived at Yale, I was woefully unprepared. The boys in my introductory physics class, who had taken far more rigorous math and science classes in high school, yawned as our professor sped through the material, while I grew panicked at how little I understood. The only woman in the room, I debated whether to raise my hand and expose myself to ridicule, thereby losing track of the lecture and falling further behind. So she's using details to explain why she didn't advance as quickly as her male peers. Kind of going back to that question of what causes this issue? She has her own firsthand account of what caused it. So uses details, I would say personal details, to explain why she didn't advance as quickly as her peers. Okay, so we've annotated the passage, and we've really thought about, well, what was the purpose in the author writing this? And it was to show that gender bias still continues against women in the sciences. And so the author starts with introducing her topic. She transitions to national statistics, and then she transitions to her own personal experience going through school and how she had to overcome issues with people believing in her, systemic bias, etc. So now we're going to answer these questions. The first question is, which of the following best explains the author's point of view about women in science careers? Option A, she believes that women are hired less often because they don't have the right education. This answer is tricky because yes, in line 5, she does say that women, when presented with identical summaries of accomplishments of 2 imaginary applicants, professors were more willing to offer a man a job. But that was not because that women didn't have the right education. So this is incorrect because this cause effect is actually incorrect. B, she believes that there is prejudice against hiring women scientists. Yes, we know she believes that, and we see that in line 10, where it says the new study goes a long way toward providing hard evidence of a continuing bias against women in the sciences. And that's where she kind of develops her claim that she's going to be explaining throughout the whole piece. Let's check C. She believes that women are usually less confident than men, and that is wrong. We did not see any evidence that she believes that. And so I'm going to write here, we can find evidence to this answer choice in line 10, and actually answer choice B is the correct answer. Question 2, what is the author's view of her educational experiences in the sciences? Earlier we noticed that phrases like angry and bored, I grew panicked, and concerns me deeply definitely demonstrate that she had a negative experience in the science field. And so let's get that down. And so because she had this negative experience in the sciences, we are going to want to choose an answer choice that aligns with this negative point of view. We will not want to choose an answer choice that is overly positive. Question 3, what function do these lines serve in the passage? I grew panicked at how little I understood. The only woman in the room, I debated whether to raise my hand and expose myself to ridicule. This is the last couple of lines of the passage, and words like panicked and the phrase like expose myself to ridicule really demonstrate her vulnerability. So they also lend a feeling of urgency and vulnerability to the situation. the author face. And this may evoke compassion in the reader and provide that real-life look at the results of bias against women in the sciences.